Cancel your wedding? My grandmother had been dead for 3 years, but the night before I married Ethan, she stood in my dream, terrified. Wake up before sunrise, go to his mother's house. You'll see everything. At 4:12 a.m., I woke shaking. I told myself it was grief. Pre-wedding nerves, nothing more. But by dawn, I was outside Susan's house and Ethan's SUV was in the driveway, even though he'd sworn he was staying with his best man. Susan opened the door, went pale, and whispered, "Alice, you shouldn't be here." Then I looked past her and saw something with my name clearly on it. To understand why seeing my name inside Susan's house terrified me, you need to understand how impossible betrayal had seemed just hours earlier. My name is Alice Morgan. I was 30 years old, working as a commercial interior designer. And until that morning, I genuinely believed I was about to marry the safest person I had ever loved. Ethan Walker was 33, a regional sales manager with an easy smile and a talent for making people feel instantly comfortable. We had been together for almost 4 years. He remembered my mother's birthday. He helped my father close his repair shop after a bad storm damaged part of the building. When I worked late, he would sometimes show up with dinner without being asked. Nothing about him felt temporary. My parents loved him. My best friend Rachel once joked that I had somehow found the last emotionally available man in America. And maybe that was why I never questioned the little things, like how often Ethan asked about the lake house my grandmother had left me. Grandma Margaret had been a school librarian most of her life. She wasn't wealthy, and neither was I, but she had held on to that small lake house for decades. To everyone else, it was valuable property. To me, it was summers on the dock, pancakes in her old kitchen, and the only place where childhood still seemed untouched. 3 years before my wedding, Grandma died. Losing her broke something in me that took a long time to repair. Ethan had been there through all of it. He helped carry boxes from her house. He drove me to the lake when I couldn't face going alone. Once. He even repaired a broken porch light because he said Margaret would have hated seeing the place neglected. So when he occasionally suggested renovating the property, I didn't hear greed, I heard practicality. When he said we could sell it someday and use the money to build something together, I thought he was imagining our future. I never asked why he seemed to know roughly what the property was worth. I never wondered why conversations about marriage so often drifted toward combining finances. Because I trusted him, completely. That night, our wedding dress hung beside my bedroom window. Flowers were already waiting at the venue. Nearly everyone we loved would be there by noon. I went to sleep believing the biggest decision of my life had already been made. Then my dead grandmother appeared in my dream. And before sunrise, I found Ethan exactly where he had promised me he wouldn't be, for several seconds. I sat in my car staring at Ethan's SUV. There had to be an explanation. Maybe Susan had called him during the night. Maybe something was wrong. Maybe he had stopped by before heading to the venue. I kept inventing reasons because the alternative felt too ugly to touch. Finally, I crossed the driveway and knocked. Susan opened the door almost immediately. The color drained from her face. Alice. Her eyes flicked past me toward the street. "What are you doing here?" "I saw Ethan's car," I said. "Is everything okay for a moment?" She didn't answer. Then she stepped aside. "Come in." The house was unnaturally quiet. I took only a few steps before I saw Ethan sitting at the dining table. He stood so quickly his chair scraped across the floor. "Alice." But I barely heard him. My attention had already moved to the table. His laptop was open. Beside it were several bills, payment statements, and pages covered in handwritten numbers. And on the screen was a photograph of my grandmother's lake house. My lake house. Underneath it was an estimated value. Next to that were figures totaling almost $200,000. My stomach dropped. Then I saw my name. Alice. Written near the top of one page. Below it were several short notes. After wedding, joint finances, lake house, debt. I froze. The room seemed to narrow around me. Ethan reached for the laptop and closed it. "This isn't what it looks like." I looked at him, What exactly does it look like? Ethan? He swallowed. I was just going over some options. For what for us? That word hit me harder than it should have. Us. He said it like it explained everything. We're getting married, he continued. Married people plan together. They combine things. They make decisions based on what's best for both of them. I pointed toward the closed laptop. Why were you looking at my grandmother's house? Susan lowered her eyes. Ethan exhaled, already sounding irritated. Because we barely use it. Alice, we've talked about that. No, he had talked about it. I had listened. Suddenly, old conversations began returning to me with completely different meanings. Why keep a place we barely use? Imagine what we could do with that equity. Once we're married, everything should feel like ours at the time. Those words had sounded practical, even romantic. Now they sounded rehearsed. I looked at the payment statements again. Is that your debt? Ethan hesitated. That hesitation answered me before he did. It's manageable. Almost $200,000 is manageable, Susan whispered. Ethan. He shot her a look, and that was when I understood something worse than the numbers. Susan knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. My hands went cold. Were you ever going to tell me Ethan stepped toward me? Alice, you're emotional. Your wedding is in a few hours. Let's not turn this into something it isn't. That sentence changed something inside me. Not the debt, not even the lake house. The way he spoke to me, as if my confusion was the problem, as if my trust had made me foolish. I stepped back before he could reach me. I need to go. Alice. Wait. I walked out. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the keys. I still didn't know whether Ethan was desperate, dishonest, or both, but I knew one thing. I was not walking down that aisle until I found out exactly what he had planned for me when I got home. The house was already full of wedding noise. Coffee cups covered the kitchen counter. My bridesmaids were laughing in the hallway. Someone was steaming my dress. My mother was arguing with the florist about missing candles. Everything looked exactly the way a wedding morning was supposed to look, and I felt like I had walked into someone else's life. Rachel found me near the stairs. Alice, you're pale. Are you okay? I forced myself to breathe. I will be. She studied me. But before she could ask another question, I slipped into my bedroom and locked the door. That was when I finally broke. Not because Ethan had debt. Not because of the lake house. Because I couldn't stop asking one question. How much of the last 4 years had been real? I thought about the night Grandma died, when Ethan stayed beside me until sunrise. I thought about him fixing the porch light at the lake house. I thought about every time he told me we were building a future together, and suddenly, every memory felt contaminated. I wiped my face, picked up my phone, and called Thomas Reed, the attorney who had handled Grandma's estate. I told him enough to make him understand the urgency. Then I asked, if I marry Ethan today, does he automatically have any right to the lake house? No, Thomas said carefully. Not simply because you're married. Relief came first. Then he continued, but if you later add him to ownership, sell the property and combine the proceeds, or voluntarily sign financial agreements, that can change things. I went completely still. Ethan didn't need to steal anything from me. He only needed me to agree. And he had spent 4 years learning exactly how to make me agree. After the call, I opened the financial information Ethan had previously shared while we were preparing for marriage. I had seen parts of it before, but I had never added everything together. Loans, payments, credit bills, losses from an investment that had gone badly. The total was close to $200,000, far more than he had ever admitted. My phone rang. Susan. For several seconds. I considered ignoring it. Then I answered. Her voice was shaking. Alice, I'm sorry. I said nothing. She started crying. She told me she had been the one who called Ethan over before dawn. She had wanted him to stop. For months. Ethan had talked about what would happen after the wedding. Renovate the lake house. Sell it. Move the money into joint finances. use a large portion to erase his debt. Then, Susan said something that made every other betrayal feel small. He said once you were married, you wouldn't want to destroy your marriage over one house. I closed my eyes. There it was. The real plan. Not the property, not the money. Me. He had counted on my loyalty, my fear of disappointing my parents, my belief that marriage meant staying when things became difficult. He had built his escape around the assumption that I would be too devoted to say no. Susan sent me several messages Ethan had written to her. I read enough. Then I stopped crying. I called Thomas again. After that, I called the officiant. "No marriage paperwork gets signed today," I said. There was a long silence. "Do you want me to cancel the ceremony?" I looked at my wedding dress hanging beside the window. No. My voice surprised even me. I'm still coming. Ethan had spent months planning what would happen after I became his wife. He had no idea I had just made sure that would never happen, by noon. The garden venue looked perfect. White chairs lined the aisle. Soft music floated through the trees. Guests smiled as the doors opened. No one knew the wedding had already ended. I stepped forward. Rachel squeezed my hand once before letting go. Then I saw Ethan waiting beneath the arch. The relief on his face almost made me stop. He thought I had come back. He thought whatever happened that morning had been contained. As I reached him, he took my hands and whispered, "You look incredible." For 1 second, I saw the man I had loved for 4 years, the man I had imagined raising children with, growing old beside. And that was the hardest moment of the day, because part of me still wanted that version of him to be real. The officiant began speaking. Then, just before the vows, I pulled my hands away. I need to say something first. The garden went silent. Ethan's smile tightened. "Alice," he murmured. "Not now." I looked directly at him. "Why was my grandmother's lake house sitting next to almost $200,000 of your debt this morning?" A murmur moved through the guests. Ethan stared at me, then gave a nervous laugh. "You misunderstood what you saw. Then, help me understand. We were planning our future. Married couples make financial decisions together. That house is valuable, and we barely use it. I was looking at options. For us, yes. The same word again. Us." I nodded slowly. "Did you plan to convince me to sell the lake house after we were married?" His jaw tightened. "I never said I was taking anything from you. That wasn't my question. Alice, this is insane. You're turning a private financial conversation into something ugly." Ethan glanced around, suddenly aware he was losing control of the room, so I asked the question that mattered most. "Did you tell your mother I'd be less likely to say no once I was your wife?" His face changed, only slightly, but I saw it. He didn't say no. Instead, he said, "You're twisting things I said under pressure." My heart broke one final time. I looked at him. "Tell everyone I made it up." Ethan said nothing. "Tell my parents you never planned to use the lake house to clear your debt." Silence. "Tell me." Alice. She didn't make it up. The voice came from the second row. Susan stood. Ethan turned toward her. "Mom, sit down." Susan shook her head. "No." Her voice trembled. "You talked about the house. You talked about the debt. And you said once Alice was married to you, she wouldn't want to end the marriage over one property." A gasp moved through the garden. Ethan stepped toward her. "Mom, stop. I should have stopped this months ago, for the first time since I had known him." Ethan had no charming smile, no calm explanation, nothing. He looked at me. "I love you." I believed that he believed it, that somehow made it worse. "Your debt isn't why I'm ending this," I said. His eyes narrowed. "Then why? Because you looked at my trust and saw leverage." He went still. "I could have helped someone I loved through debt. I could have stood beside you while you rebuilt everything." My voice shook, but I didn't stop. "But I will not marry a man who planned his future around my inability to say no." I slipped the engagement ring from my finger and placed it gently in his palm. No throwing it, no screaming, just the truth. There won't be a wedding today. Ethan closed his hand around the ring. "Alice, please, For 4 years. I had turned toward his voice. This time, I turned away. Rachel was already walking toward me. My mother stood. Then my father. Behind me. Ethan called my name again. I kept walking, and with every step toward the exit, the future he had planned for me disappeared. For the first time that morning, I could finally see my own. The moment I stepped outside the garden, my knees nearly gave out. Rachel caught my arm before I stumbled. Behind us, I could still hear voices rising from the ceremony area, confused guests, crying relatives, Ethan calling after me. But no one followed. For the first time all morning, there was nothing left for me to perform. My mother found me near the parking lot and wrapped both arms around me. She was crying harder than I was. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. My father came a few seconds later. He looked back toward the venue, then at me. I expected anger. Instead, he said quietly, "You never have to marry someone just because everyone already showed up." That was the sentence that finally broke me. I cried against my mother's shoulder until I had nothing left. The days afterward were messy. There were canceled reservations, awkward explanations, relatives calling with questions, and boxes of wedding decorations I couldn't look at for weeks. Ethan sent message after message. At first, he apologized. Then he explained. Then he apologized for explaining. He admitted the debt had terrified him. He said he really did love me. He said he had convinced himself that after we were married, solving his financial problems together would simply be part of being a family. For a while. That almost hurt more than if he had admitted everything was fake, because I believed he probably had loved me. But love had not stopped him from manipulating me, and love did not erase what he had planned. I never responded. Thomas confirmed what I already knew. Nothing had been signed. The lake house remained mine, and there was no financial battle waiting for me. I didn't sue Ethan. I didn't contact his employer. I didn't try to destroy his reputation. His debt was his responsibility. My future was mine. 6 months later, I drove back to Grandma's lake house. The porch needed work. The kitchen cabinets were worn. Part of the dock had started to sag. For years, I had treated the property like something frozen in time because changing it felt like losing Grandma again. So I finally changed it. I repaired the porch, I restored the kitchen, I fixed the dock. Ethan had wanted to renovate the house so we could sell it. I renovated it so I could keep it. One afternoon, Grandma's longtime friend Helen came to visit. Before she left, she handed me an old envelope. Margaret had given it to her years earlier. Inside was one short message. "Don't confuse endurance with love." I read it twice. Then I looked across the lake. Maybe my dream had been Grandma. Maybe it had simply been some buried part of me finally refusing to ignore what I already knew. I stopped needing an answer. For the first time in months, peace was enough. The night before my wedding, I thought canceling it would destroy the future I had spent years building. I was wrong. I didn't lose my future that day. I stopped someone else from deciding what it would become. Love can ask for compromise. It can ask for patience, but it should never require you to surrender your right to say no. And sometimes, walking away isn't failure. It's the first honest step forward. What would you have done in my place? Canceled immediately? Or confronted Ethan at the ceremony? Tell me below, and subscribe for more stories.